We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Thank you, Sunbeams, and welcome everyone to another exciting Reddit talk here on Our Food. My name is Meg, and I'm joined by Justine, aka Mixtape Montage, and we'll be your hosts today. We're also the hosts of Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes, a podcast where we review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher. And today, it's our absolute pleasure to welcome Odette Williams as our guest. Odette Williams is an Australian cook and writer with a simple, effortless cooking style. She is the author of Simple Cake, which was named one of the best cookbooks of 2019 by the New York Times. Odette has also created an eponymous brand of aprons and kitchenware, writes for the Wall Street Journal, and has been featured in Food Network, Rachel Ray, Vogue, InStyle, and Martha Stewart, among many other publications. Odette is here with us today to tell us all about her new cookbook, Simple Pasta, Pasta Made Easy and Life Made Better. Simple Pasta is a book of simple, tasty recipes you'll happily return to again and again. Simple Pasta hit bookstores last week, and you can grab a copy for yourself wherever books are sold. So if you haven't done a Reddit talk before, here's how it works. Basically, it's an audio AMA. So for about the next hour, we have Odette here with us. You get to ask her your questions about pasta and cooking. And in order to do so, you have to log into Reddit, join the talk here, and raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. If you receive an invite to come up on stage, please accept that invite, and when prompted to do so by one of us, go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question. You can unmute and mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible, so let's get started. I'm going to throw it over to my co-host Justine to ask our first question while we wait for viewers/listeners to join us.
Yes, hello. I have a question here. So, Odette, you say in the introduction to Simple Pasta, this book could have been called Pasta, I Love You So Much It Hurts. It's been a long-standing affair. Can you tell us a little bit more about your love affair with how that got started?
Yeah, I mean, I still to this day could quite happily eat pasta most nights of the week. I just have always gravitated towards pasta. It's like been such a comfort, and it's like never let me down, and doesn't matter kind of what I do to it, it always just tastes good. So I was pretty pumped to get the opportunity to write a book on the subject because I felt like I knew a lot.
Pasta has never let me down either. Oh, and also for everyone tuning in, I meant to mention before, if you're feeling a little shy and don't want to jump on stage to ask Odette your question, you can also leave questions within the post itself. So you can just leave a comment and we'll be checking that to ask questions from the Reddit post itself. And it looks like we do have a guest. So the Sullivan line, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, so I have a question about pasta. I see sometimes on the package of the more expensive ones where it's the copper dye.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so they're kind of promoting that like in recent times. It's funny, you never used to see it on the packaging. But what they're basically saying there is when you roll your own pasta, you roll it on a board, and they often cut it with a metal cutter. And so when you're rolling the pasta on the wooden board, it has a texture to it. It gets this a toothsomeness to it that holds the sauce. And so when they do those extruded pastas, if they just had a smooth metal, it wouldn't get that texture. So what they're doing with the die cut metal is that they're making sure that those extruded shapes have some kind of like toothsome feel to it, as if you had kind of rolled it on a wooden board. So it's just making a more kind of like interesting texture to the pasta that the sauce can cling to.
Thank you so much for your question, Sullivan Line. Odette, who is your inspiration?
That's a good question. My appetite. I have quite a few, and it's funny. My inspiration, funnily enough, is not so much one individual, but the restaurants that I have loved in my lifetime that have served the kind of food and the recipes that I've developed for simple pasta. So, even when I was a little kid, we used to go to this Italian restaurant called the Trieste, and I grew up in Australia, and it was this 2 hours north of Sydney, and there was a big Italian community, and it was like you would go to this local family-run restaurant, and the food was always really consistently fantastic. The menu never changed. It was kind of like a blackboard menu, and that's what I tried to replicate actually in Simple Pasta in the seasons. Is I wanted to do the thinking for you, because I know what it's like, and one of the joys I think of going to a restaurant is not only is the cooking done for you, but the thinking is done. And when it's a good restaurant, that everything on that menu, and they usually, I think, a sign of a good restaurant is often they have a very small menu. I was inspired by many, many restaurants in my upbringing and my adult life that I gravitate towards, that I return to, that become my local, because the food is always consistently good, and they usually, they do pasta very, very well. And honestly, even in my neighborhood, I live in Brooklyn, and we have a local Frankie's, and it's just consistently good. It's been making homemade pasta for a long time, and that's where I want to go when I don't want to cook, but I want to feel looked after.
I definitely agree that a hallmark of a good restaurant is a small menu, because that they execute on every single item perfectly.
Totally. And I love when you walk in and it's just here's a appetizer, here's a salad, choose your main, and I've got 2 desserts, and I've got a red and a white and and a something. And I love that, because you don't have to make big decisions, and great, this is all going to go together really well.
Absolutely. All right, Bitchy Barbie, it looks like you're still with us. Thank you for your patience. Please ask your question.
So sorry about that. I actually just had a simple question. What's your go-to pasta recipe when you're home and you just want something comforting?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a hard question, though. I mean, in the book, the red sauce that I point everyone towards, which is one of my go-tos, is called the Luxurious Pomodoro. And you would swear it has been boiling away, bubbling away for hours, but it's not. It comes together 15 minutes. And you put in olive oil, garlic, fresh oregano, and then you put in just good canned tomatoes, salt and pepper, some fresh, if you want to add any other fresh herbs, you can. But the key to it is that when you're putting it in, you think, oh, maybe I'm putting in too much oil, but you're not, because it coats like a pound of pasta just perfectly. And it doesn't matter what shape you're using, or if you're using potato gnocchi. And it's super full bodied, because I melt a couple of anchovies into the oil. And even if you don't like anchovies, you don't even really taste them. It just adds this body to the sauce and this saltiness. And I don't know if you know that brand. Another go-to, honestly, and I give people permission to do this in the book, is I'll just buy dried pasta, and I really love that bottled Rouse sauce. And I think that this Luxurious Pomodoro is in that camp of just great red sauce, put it on pasta, even if it's not homemade pasta, it's store-bought, and then blanket it in Parmesan cheese. So that's my low lift, go-to. If not, maybe a carbonara. because that's also like, I find that pretty quick to come together, and I usually have like the ingredients hanging around.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for your question. Tin Puffin, you can now unmute yourself.
Thank you, everybody. So I've been on kind of a mini journey for pasta. Like I love cooking, and so going through the phases and all that. Most recently, YouTubers like Alex, the French cooking guy, and Adam Ragusa. I picked up a couple of tips, and I just want to know your opinion about them. So one of them is you want to salt the water that you're going to be boiling in as salty as the ocean. Is something that you would agree to, or maybe adjust it a little?
Yeah, I'm going to say something a bit controversial, and I'm going to adjust it a little bit, because I think the thing with salt is you can always add it, you can't take it away. And from my experience with fresh homemade pasta, it's really porous. And one of the mistakes I made one day when I was having some friends over was I'd had a few drinks and I was, not really concentrating, and I just put way too much salt in the water. And the fresh pasta was so salty. And it was such a lesson for me, because I really felt like, I think people are better off just lightly salting their water, and you can go a little bit more heavy-handed when you're using the dried pasta, but fresh pasta just takes on the flavor and of the salt so easily. And you got to remember, like, you've got the sauce there that's going to add salt in as well, so personally, I err on the side of like, don't be too overzealous. Like, I think it's good for people, because like, I think that salty by the sea kind of came about because most people never realized they needed to salt their water to cook pasta, so for many years no one did. But if I was you, I'd err on the side and remember that you can always add a little bit more salt to your sauce a bit later on. And also you're going to put cheese on it too, probably, which is salty.
No, that's super. Thank you. I have just one other one, real quick for you. So again, this is going to be a cooking question. So in a different video I saw where they go through the different experiments of how much water do you actually need to properly cook the water. So normally, I think most of us are aware of the big pot of water, and just allow it to just be able to go through the rolling boil and be able to turn on itself. But one thing I saw, it was using very minimal water, still so that it can coat all the noodles, the pasta itself. But you're not adding so much, so that when you actually then remove the pasta, then you have a really carbohydrate-rich liquid that you then make a sauce out of.
Yeah.
Yay or nay to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, it's so interesting, because I probably sit somewhere in the middle, because I think you do need enough water in there for the pasta to kind of like turn over on itself and not stick together and kind of cook around. Just like anything, it needs space to cook evenly and not get all tangled up together. And I also, like, since writing the book, like, I barely ever dump my pasta water now, because I use a spider which is like this metal utensil that you can fish out your pasta with out of the water. And sometimes if I've got like a lot of pasta, especially with homemade stuff, if I'm making a lasagna or just like a bigger quantity of it, I'll just recycle that water. And I swear to God, the once you've cooked like a couple of rounds of pasta in there, it's like liquid gold. You know how starchy and wonderful it is. So I definitely think like there is something to not putting too much water in it. But also when you make the fresh stuff, there's a lot more flour on the seam, so that starchy water comes together a lot faster, you know. And honestly, guys, you know what you can also do is, even if you're buying store-bought pasta, you can just add like a little bit of flour into that water, you know, that with the store-bought, and that'll do the same trick if you're worried that it's not starchy enough.
Well, thank you so much, Odette. Thanks, y'all, for having us, and good luck with your books. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tin Puffin. You know what? We had some of our own questions about pasta water and saltiness, so they went right ahead and asked them for us. So we appreciate that. While we're waiting for more folks to join us, I had a question for you. You say in your introduction to Simple Pasta that you had never made your own fresh pasta until you were 40. Well, that's me too. I love pasta. I'll be 40 next year, but I've never made fresh pasta from scratch before. So what's the number one tip you would have for beginners like me? What's the most important thing?
Oh, you know, just relax. It's only pasta is where I'd start with the advice. And once you make, say, an egg dough or a gnocchi, you'll know how to make it. You know, you'll have a sense of it, and you'll know like what it feels like and how long it takes you. And then, funnily enough, like the more you do it, the faster you get. So I would say just think of it as you're mixing liquid with flour. It's just that simple, you know, whether it be eggs and flour, whether it be, you know, like water and the semolina flour. So it's really, there's nothing complicated about it. It's really just like doing a cake mix, you know, and like we all know how to add the liquid to a cake mix and bring it into a batter. Well, it's pretty much like that, making homemade pasta. You know, you're just adding some liquid to the flour, you bring it into a ball of dough, and then you're just either rolling it out or you're rolling it into gnocchi, shaping it. And I have a recipe for potato gnocchi in the book because I adore gnocchi. And the way I explain it to people that haven't made it before is like, just think of it as mashed potato. It's mashed potato with a bit of Parmesan cheese and an egg and some salt and pepper and a bit of flour in there. And I think when you say that to people, they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do mashed potato, you know. So give yourself plenty of time on the first time that you do it, and pour yourself a glass of wine.
Always have to have wine with cooking. Thank you for the advice. It's kind of like a Great British Bake Off. You don't have to cry over cake. I guess you don't have to cry over pasta either.
Yeah, I think it would be a sin to cry over pasta.
Too much salt.
Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned in Simple Pasta that you worked in an Italian restaurant in your 20s. What other training or education do you have when it comes to cooking, or are you self-taught?
You know, I'm largely self-taught. I come from a family of really good cooks. My mum's a really good cook. My aunts are really good cooks. And we always I think food was just kind of like, you know, having great meals was just part of a family tradition. So I think I remember my aunt teaching me how to make schnitzel when I was like, I think I must have been like 4 or 5. I went and stayed over at her house, and she taught me, you know, the Stations of the Cross with making schnitzel. So for the most part, I think I learned a lot just myself. And then even when I was a kid, like growing up in Australia, there was lots of cooks like Bill Granger and Donna Hay and this other publication called The Woman's Weekly, and they really made cooking very like democratic. Anyone could come at it. You could try anything. It wasn't like, oh, I'm not a baker or I'm not a whatever. It's like, oh, you feel like that? You want to make that? Yeah, go for it, you know? And so I think I don't know. I just always was so food motivated, and I just learned a lot. And then I was like an actor in a previous life. And of course, actors, all they do is waitress and work in restaurants. And so I learned a lot there. Like I worked in this nothing at all related to pasta, but I worked in a really fantastic, reputable restaurant in Vancouver, Vikram Vij. It's called Vij's. And he taught me an awful lot, he and his wife, just about preparing food and at a certain level and a certain standard, and attaching that to a hospitality that was really personalized, and pairing it with wines. And, every night when we'd come into work, we'd be kind of like, he'd ask us questions about it, to really, so we knew our stuff. And then I think, I worked in that Italian restaurant, and I learned so much even during that time as well. Like, just the father used to make his own gelato, and, he used to lovingly kind of attend to it. And it was just so amazing to watch this person who could make, all these different flavors of gelato, and, or consistently serve the lasagna and it tasted the same every single time. I mean, they're real skills, and to maintain like a certain standard. So I think I just absorbed my knowledge from many places,
Your answer reminds me a lot of what Samin Nosrat has said of salt, fat, acid, heat. She learned a lot through her various kitchen cooking experiences, and really just the experience and cooking a lot with a lot of different people.
Yeah, I think that honestly, one of my favorite things to do is to cook with other people, like even if I'm with my friends, because it's such a gift, because you see them do something that you don't do, that you're like, oh my goodness, like, oh, I'm going to do that from here on in. Or maybe they just make a recipe that's not in your usual arsenal of recipes. And it's just so refreshing to say, to see something new and different. And I just love that about cooking. I love that about food. It's like, it's always like a purveyor or a wine or an oil or a cheese that you haven't tried, or you don't know and you want to learn more about it. It's like, I just think it's a lifelong pursuit. That's a lovely one.
Absolutely. And definitely a community experience like you describe. And speaking of community, we're going to go to our food community. We do have a question in the comment section. Ainsley114 says, I made a lasagna last week that turned out so soupy, and I don't know why. Any tips? Might be a little hard for us to troubleshoot that, but yeah, any tips for overly soupy lasagna or pasta?
Well, first place I go for that might be that there was too much liquid in the tomatoes, like that maybe there was too much water in the tomatoes, and maybe that sauce needed to reduce down or not be so runny. But maybe if you made a bolognese lasagna, it could have also been, I've actually just made a lasagna today because tomorrow I'm having a launch party for my book, and there was a lot of moisture in the meat actually, and I had to cook the meat a lot longer to reduce that. So it could have also been that if you'd made a meat one. If you did a vegetable one too, I tend to like cook my vegetables before I put them in the lasagna, so that any liquid in the, not only does it make it more flavorful, because I usually do it in the oven or fry them in some butter and oil and garlic and salt and pepper, but so it gives it more flavor, but it also takes away any liquid. But now I really want to problem solve your soupy lasagna. I love my lasagnas bechamel heavy or ricotta heavy, so I tend to not have as much tomato in there and a little bit more bechamel. So
it looks like we have Ainsley themselves here.
Yeah.
Perhaps can answer some questions so that Odette can help you troubleshoot.
Hello.
Hi. Tell me about lasagna.
So listening to what you said, I think that maybe I did use a I used a jarred sauce, but I got a lot of like the like more runnier liquid out of it first, so it was like thicker, and then I added meat to it, and then when I went to layer, I didn't drain my ricotta before I put that in there, so
yeah.
I think, and then I layered it with sliced mozzarella and then put some mazzithra on top of that and then layered it a couple more times. But like when I went to cut it, everything was cooked well, but it just literally was just soup. Like, and my friends that I made it for were like, oh, this is so good. And we have dinner once a month, and we have like a dinner and game night. And I was like, okay, but on the scale of the things I've made previously, they're like, it's probably the last one on the list.
Oh, at least your friends are honest. I love that. I love that.
I was like, well, is that a good thing? And they're like, well, it's not bad. It's just not as good as your enchiladas or your chicken spaghetti. And so I was like, okay.
Well, it's probably, I think, like not draining the ricotta for sure. And then do you fry your meat in some onion and everything before adding the red sauce to it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And I drained it, like I put it on a paper towel and kind of like drained off any excess first and then put it back with the sauce.
Oh, well, the other part too is maybe it didn't have enough pasta in there. Could that possibly be in it? Because more pasta would absorb more liquid, you know? Like the other thing I do is one of the perks of making homemade lasagna is when you have the fresh sheets of pasta. There's nothing like it. It's like the layers are just so thin and scrumptious and delicious. And sometimes I find that helps because I've already cooked the sheets of fresh pasta, and it only takes like a minute in the hot water just to soften it and I put it down. And then I really feel like I have a sense of like how wet the lasagna is because I'm actually seeing the layers kind of come together, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I've never actually made homemade pasta, and I've always been kind of like daunted by it. Like I'm scared to attempt it.
Oh, I totally hear you. But I totally believe you can, and it'll be such an unlock. And it really is just, it'll make you need to come back with your friends and with. I'll get this crew to send you the lasagna recipe, and it's going to take you a while because you're going to have to make the fresh pasta, and there's going to be pots and pans, which is the pain about lasagna, but it'll feed a lot, and it is so good. Like when you have the fresh pasta, it's like next level lasagna.
Okay.
Well, I totally hear you on the lasagna. I mean, making homemade pasta, but you'll just squeal with delight.
Have any of you ever cooked with gluten-free lasagna or tried to make gluten-free lasagna?
Yeah, you know what there is? There's a really awesome gluten-free flour put out by Caputo's, which is this Italian brand of flour that I use for non-gluten-free egg dough. And it is the closest thing I've ever had to like the real deal. And you really wouldn't know it's gluten-free in the taste. And the only difference is when you roll out the pasta, because it doesn't have the gluten in there, it doesn't have that elasticity that the other dough has. So what I do is I roll it out with a rolling pin first, then I feed it through the pasta roller. But you will not notice the difference. It's a really amazing gluten-free flour. It's a Caputo's one.
Wow, that's interesting. My wife has made her own pasta before, but she recently did some vegan and gluten-free lasagna, making the cashew ricotta and stuff like that. And it was good. The flavor was all there. It's just like some of the, like we used obviously just a box of, store gluten-free pasta, and it was just it was inconsistent throughout the lasagna. I mean, there was some parts that were pretty good, but others that were just
Look, I mean, honestly, if you can buy it on Amazon, it's really like phenomenal what they've done with that gluten-free flour. Because you know how normally with gluten-free you have to mix a whole bunch of other flours, and then you've got to have them on hand. And if you don't have them on hand, and
what was the brand you said?
it's called Caputos, Caputos.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds somewhat familiar. Yeah, we'll have to check that. Interesting. It's on Amazon.
Free 00 flour.
Cool. Very interesting.
And I think you can use it for pizzas as well, actually, for pizza dough, I think. I haven't done it myself, but I'm pretty sure you can.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gluten-free, you kind of got you do things a little differently. I get it. Yeah, it's cool. Very cool. Thanks for the recommendation.
I think you guys will like it.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Psychic Defective. Do you have a question for Odette?
I actually just wanted to say how nice and helpful this has been, and in the spirit of things, I've posted to the comments an excellent flowchart on the stuff to keep around for churning out varied simple meals that's been going around the internet for years. And I just wanted to thank you all for your time. It's really nice to hear people talking about the gluten-free alternatives to pasta and such when, even though I don't have a gluten allergy, it's nice to know that there's some options there to cook for people that come over to visit.
100%. Yeah, there's lots of amazing store-bought gluten-free pastas too now on the market. It's there's lots to choose from.
Thank you for your thoughts. Freedom Fallout, do you have a question for Odette?
Yeah, I'm a student right now, and so I'm living off campus at a university. And we end up making a lot of carby stuff. So, of course, it's a lot of ramen, lots of rice, and lots of pasta. I've recently kept a lot of white wine on hand for cooking, but I realize a lot of recipes don't use it. What I was curious to know is if you had any go-to recipes that utilize white wine, just so that I can kind of get it out of my fridge, more or less.
Oh, my God. Yes, I do. You know what white wine loves? It loves seafood. And it loves chicken too. It loves chicken and seafood. In my book, I have I don't know if you like clams, but I have a clam linguine, and then I top it with, it's got lemon and butter and the white wine, and then I top it with just crunchy garlic breadcrumbs and lots of herbs, and it's just so simple and it comes together so easily. And then I have another one that takes a very similar approach, but it's just with garlic shrimp. And what the wine does is it just adds more kind of an interesting flavor to it, but also just kind of keeps the seafood lovely and moist. But I think whenever you saute garlic and onion, and whether you have a protein or even other vegetables, you can always add a splash of wine. And then if you just reduce it, and then the other thing it really loves is cream. White wine loves cream. So, if you follow that kind of premise of I saute some onions, I get them nice and softened, I add some garlic, I put a bit of butter, a bit of oil, I'm going to put in a splash, maybe I saute my protein, and then I take it out and I'm going to just deglaze the pan with some white wine, and then I'm going to put a splash of cream in. If you just follow that kind of formula, you use that white wine in no time.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, because what I just remembered is we have a ton of shrimp in the fridge right now, and that's scampies and such, and so I guess I just need to get a pasta grill with it.
Oh,
but thank you.
Yeah, just go and buy a pound of pasta and just buy some breadcrumbs and top it all with some crispy garlic breadcrumbs.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Corn Dog Man, if you could please unmute yourself.
So I have a question, since we're kind of on the topic of different materials or anything like that for pastas. Have you heard of any recipes with tomato soup, cans of it?
Years ago, my aunt used to make this kind of she used to hack a recipe by adding a can of soup to, she used to bread chicken, and then instead of making her own tomato sauce, she would she would put, a little bit of canned tomato soup in there at the bottom. So funny because my dad used to love tinned tomato soup, and I used to love it too with toast, but I haven't had it for years, and because I haven't had it for years, I'm not really cooking with it. But, there's nothing to say that you couldn't build out a sauce from a can of tomatoes, you could even just make tomato soup from a can more flavorful by sauteing onion, garlic, putting in some fresh herbs, maybe a splash of cream, so I'm sure there's all sorts of chicken, parmesanas that have canned tomato soup in there.
So my grandmother, funny enough, actually has a recipe for it. You have to choose whatever protein you like. Mainly we use either beef or turkey because those are the most readily available. And you'll put your spices in, you'll put your herbs in, whatever you want to choose. And then you go and put 3 or 4 cans of tomato soup and boil that down a little bit. And you can put gluten-free, any type of pasta you want, any shape, it's always really good. I've kind of been raised on it, honestly.
Yeah, so it's your comfort meal.
All right, Bryn Walk, you're on stage now, and I know you have a question because I've seen you in the comments. Go ahead.
Hey, just real quick, I was wanting to try my hand at some gnocchi. I just didn't have a potato ricer or anything like that. I didn't know if you had any tips.
Yeah, the great news is you don't need a ricer. You can just use either the finest side of a box grater. So just boil the potatoes. If you're doing potato gnocchi, just boil the potatoes in some water until they're softened. And then when they're cool enough to touch, you just peel off the skins. And then when they're kind of cool enough to kind of handle, just kind of grate it like you would cheese, but on the finest side of the box grater. And that'll do the trick. And then the other thing that I sometimes use is I own one of those large microplanes. And I'll often I'll just do the potatoes on the microplane, and it makes a really fine little kind of grate of the potato. And then, really another option too is, you could just use a masher and really mash it so that there's 0 lumps in there,
Okay.
And then all you do is then you just add some egg, some flour, a little bit of grated, very, very finely grated Parmesan, some salt and pepper. You roll that all together into a dough, roll it into the snake, and then cut it up, and you're good to go. And then
Awesome.
And then the other easier gnocchi, honestly, to start with is ricotta gnocchi. Because if you with ricotta gnocchi, you just have fresh ricotta. It's been drained. You add some egg. You add some Parmesan cheese. You add some flour, salt and pepper. It's a very kind of wet mixture, but I just tend to really flour my board. And you just roll out the snakes on the floured board and cook that. I mean, even simpler.
Yeah, that sounds great. I always tend to use a little too much flour anyway.
Yeah, well, they're both pretty forgiving, so you should definitely give it a crack and try it with my luxurious pomodoro sauce. You'll have 0 regrets.
Alrighty. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, while we're on the topic of tools to have in the kitchen, what would you say are some must-have tools that you need for making pasta?
Okay. Well, chopping board is really helpful. Large mixing bowl is great. If you're making gnocchi, you really only need that box grater. If you want to make semolina doughs, like to make cavatelli or orecchiette, you only need a butter knife. But if you want to make egg dough, I really, really recommend that you either buy or borrow a friend's, if you just want to even try it out, a hand-cranked pasta roller. And then if you fall in love with making homemade pasta like I did, I then invested in one of those KitchenAid pasta rolling attachments, and they are the best thing ever for making homemade pasta, because it just makes, I make the dough in the KitchenAid in the main mixing bowl, and then I just put the pasta roller attachment on and I just roll out the sheets in no time. And I really can't sing their praises enough. You know, like they're just a really wonderful tool. And I think like since I bought mine, I make homemade pasta so much more than I ever would have, you know, because they do make it so easy.
Your collection sounds amazing. So you've already answered a controversial question previously, so I've got another one for you.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on adding oil to the water when boiling pasta?
Well, as it stands right now, I don't really see any benefit, because oil and water don't really mix. I think salt is, if you're going to add anything to the water, add some salt, you know. What I do think when you should add the oil is after you've cooked the pasta. After you've cooked it, if you're not kind of moving quickly and, you know, you're worried it's all going to stick together, the best insurance you can do then is add a splash of olive oil to your cooked pasta, you know.
All right, well, it's settled law now, and also don't oversalt your water.
Yeah, especially with the fresh stuff.
Absolutely. All right, it looks like we do have a guest on stage. Gaiman Gods, ask your question.
Hey, quick question. So, if I go to a restaurant, what pasta should I order? What would be the tips to find a good pasta in the menu?
Oh, that's a good question. I would. Oh, well, I think a good test of a restaurant would be if they did a good carbonara. And yeah, any of the like classics, the amatriciana, carbonara, puttanesca, you know, if you can pull them off, they're simple, but they're, you know, when done well, they're sublime. But then sometimes I feel like when you're out at a restaurant, you know, I tend to gravitate towards things that I won't cook at home that aren't simple, you know, that maybe like a cannelloni or like a really great lasagna. That's how I tend to roll when I go to a restaurant.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, another question. So you did simple cake first, and now simple pasta. Any other simple cookbooks in the works?
I say like cookbooks like children, you know, like after you've had it, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing that to myself again. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I think I'll have another baby. I think there's a lot of places that you could take simple in terms of food. I think that I really love trying to make the seemingly complicated simple and really accessible. So, you know, for the time being, I just have my column at the Wall Street Journal that just started, and that's called Party Trick, and it's all about just simple entertaining and things that you can cook, you know, for friends, because I think that we're all, after the pandemic, really ready to be with our friends and the people we love and just have simple ideas that we can recreate. And I think also since the pandemic too, we have got more adventurous about what we're cooking at home, like taking on projects maybe that we mightn't have before. So for now, I'll get simple pasta out there in the world, and I'll keep giving you guys great, simple, entertaining recipes. And who knows, maybe that might be the next one.
Well, I'm definitely going to check out Party Trick. That sounds right up my alley. I love that. And going to the comment section, we have a comment and a question from Not Your MF Baby. They say, first, as a growing cook, I greatly appreciate this. And then their question, what are good alternatives to make healthier pasta?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, here's the thing, is that pasta, it's really seasonal. And, you know, like today I just went to New York. I'm in New York, and I went to this farmer's market in the city, and the produce was just off the charts good because it's the end of summer and we've just had rain, and just the tomatoes, and it was just, you know, eggplants, and just so many amazing things that would go with pasta, just even down to like fresh herbs. Like pasta, I would say in the book, like good pasta, good butter, end of story, you know. And even if you're just putting in a handful of like really good fresh herbs, or stirring in, you know, arugula and wilting it, and you know, or baby spinach, or I have a recipe in the book where I love sun gold tomatoes, and they're only around, you know, kind of this time of year, and they're really sweet and they're little, and I just slice them up and I just warm them in a bit of butter, and or you could just do oil, and then I just, you know, toss them through the pasta with some fresh basil and a little dollop of fresh ricotta, a bit of Parmesan cheese, and it's so light and seasonal. You know, it doesn't feel like the super heavy pastas, you know, that or I have like a chopped salad pasta that's just feels light and delicious. And so I really tried to make the, like, you know, I have like the filled pasta where I have like the corn and jalapeno, or the beet and carrot ravioli, you know, like I think it can be super healthy, and I think it can be super light as well.
Definitely, as you were just describing, like pasta can just be a great vehicle for delicious vegetables.
Totally. Like that's why I put the book into seasons, you know, like, because that's when and how we should cook, you know, in sync with what's available. And so it's really when that produce is at its peak, you know, like the great thing is pasta lets it shine, you know, it doesn't upstage it.
What is one of your favorite recipes from Simple Pasta?
Oh my goodness, this is always the hardest question. It's like Sophie's choice. Oh goodness. Oh, this is really, it's very, very torturous. Well, I do love the potato gnocchi with a luxurious pomodoro sauce. Amazing. I love my wicked white bolognese. That is so good. And then I would say, actually, I really love the corn and jalapeno and ricotta ravioli. It's just, and it's got a little brown butter on top, and it's just different, and it's light, and it's unexpected, and everything just feels right when you're reading it.
I, for one, am really glad that dinner is right after this Reddit talk, because I am very hungry. And speaking of, we are going to be wrapping up this talk pretty soon, but we do have time to get a few more questions from the audience. So if you're listening and you want to ask Odette a question, you can click the hand icon to be invited to the stage. But in the meantime, you previously mentioned, Odette, a little bit about that it's totally okay to use dry pasta if you don't want to make fresh pasta. So I was wondering if there are any particular pasta dishes that you feel are better suited for dry store-bought pasta.
Yeah, there definitely are. And it's the pasta dishes that, you know, require like the emulsification usually of like the pasta water and the fat. And so like carbonara is a great example. Like it needs like a robust kind of to kind of stand up to the or cacio e pepe, you know, to the stirring or the tossing that goes on to create the creamy sauce. So I think those ones really just you can make homemade pasta, but I don't think they necessarily shine when there's homemade pasta, you know, and also too, the homemade pasta kind of goes against the spirit of those dishes, which is I'm hungry. You know, this is kind of like a pantry pasta, and it's going to come together really quick, and it's going to be delicious. You know, or like I have a recipe in there just where I have, you know, some grilled fish, and I just do orzo and butter and fresh herbs, and you know, I mean, you could just never recreate that at home. Those like small little shapes like orzo or ditalini.
I hadn't thought about that before, is picking the pasta shapes that are difficult to recreate at home. That's a great tip. Thank you.
It looks like we don't have anybody else asking questions, so this will be a good time. Odette, if you could please just like let everybody know where they can find you, where they can find your books.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for tuning in. I'm really touched, and thank you so much. And you can find me on Instagram at Odette Williams. My website is just my name, OdetteWilliams.com. And you can find both my books, Simple Cake and Simple Pasta, at really any independent bookstore, or you can go through Penguin Random House and choose, you know, where you'd like to purchase it, or you can purchase it on Amazon. And you can find my column, Party Trick, in the Wall Street Journal. And that is roughly every 3-4 weeks on the weekend in the off-duty section.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us. For more of Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes, you can find us on your favorite podcatcher or go to podappetitpodcast.com, where we release new episodes every other Monday. And we're going to have another talk coming soon with Ji-Hai Kim, owner of Miss Kim in Ann Arbor, Michigan, named Best New Chef of 2021 by Food and Wine Magazine. And this talk will be Wednesday, September 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So we'll see all of you there. And thanks again, Odette, for joining us today. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. And thanks for tuning in. And you know, if you ever have any pasta questions, just ping me on Instagram, and I'm happy to help. But it's a pure joy, that food. So I hope you get a lot of pleasure from my book and eating pasta.
Thank you, Odette.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Josh.
And together we are Bloody Date Night.
Bloody Date Night asks the question, can a horror expert show his horror novice
Who you calling a horror novice?
horror movies that he loves and she's seeing for the first time?
It's about what happens when you introduce the person you love to the thing you love, and they're probably gonna hate it.
Just like me with taxes.
We're Bloody Date Night. Give us a listen.
Get your headphones on and bebop time.